On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Kings, your daily Sacramento Kings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, it is that time for another episode of Locked On Kings.
They may not have meant to, but The Athletic has completely disrespected star Sacramento Kings guard De'Aaron Fox. Have you seen their NBA player tier list that they put out? They have De'Aaron Fox on tier 4. And with some of the players that are on tier 3, and especially the players that are listed on the same tier as De'Aaron, it's nothing short of disrespectful. We'll go over that. Plus, on today's Locked On Kings podcast, I'm going to be joined by Jake Madison, the host of Locked On Pelicans. There have been reports of conversations between the Kings and the Pelicans in regards to a Buddy Hield for Josh Hart sign and trade. I'm already not the biggest fan of this move. And in this conversation with Jake, not only are you going to hear how complicated this move is, you're going to hear why I believe this move is not going to happen. It's all on today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast. Hello and welcome into Locked On Kings, your podcast hub for Sacramento Kings coverage all regular season and all off season. If you're looking for in-depth analysis, game-by-game breakdowns, highlights, interviews with local and national experts, full coverage of the Sacramento Kings from January all the way through to December, this is the place for you, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. My name is Matt George, and I'm changing up my credentials here a little bit today. I actually have an announcement at the end of the podcast, some big career news for me. Don't worry, it has no effect on the Locked On Kings podcast, but it switches up my intro a little bit. Normally, I'd tell you, and it's true, I have been a Sacramento sports radio host for the last 7 years, and this is going to be season number 8 for me covering the Kings, both as an on-air host and multimedia journalist, but that's changing a little bit. I'll share more at the end of the podcast. But let's get to what's really important, the meat and potatoes of this podcast here today. And that's this tier list that The Athletic put out. De'Aaron Fox is the only King that is on this tier list. Now, this didn't cover all of the NBA and every single player. It's really only the top 5 tiers. And De'Aaron Fox is on number 4. And with some of the players that are on 5, some of the players that are even on 4, I would expect Tyrese Halliburton to be somewhere on this tier list, but he's not there yet. Okay, I can live with that. And look, I love The Athletic. I'm a loyal subscriber to The Athletic. I love Jason Jones's content that he does covering the Sacramento Kings specifically. I, of course, love the content from Sam Amick, who is very plugged in with the Sacramento Kings organization, but also provides that national perspective. Of course, Shams and just a bunch of other great NBA and sports writers in general on The Athletic. So I really love their content. So it's not a bah humbug, I'm canceling my subscription type offense here with this tier list, but it is certainly disagreeable. And it basically reaffirms the idea that people just don't, outside of Sacramento really, just don't watch Kings basketball. And I, to an extent, understand why, right? The Kings have been bad for so long. When you're a national reporter and you're trying to pay attention to every game that you can, the Kings aren't going to be too high on your priority list. But when you're talking about a player of De'Aaron Fox's caliber, you need to make sure you take into account what he's going through in Sacramento, how much is on his shoulders in Sacramento, and just how damn good he is, how great of a season that he had last year, how he continues to improve marginally every single season, to where last season he became that guy that put the team on his back, led the team in scoring, and was the facilitator as well that the Kings wanted him to be when he was drafted number 5 overall. De'Aaron Fox is an absolute star. He's an absolute star, and it's only a matter of time before he is an NBA All-Star. The only thing working against De'Aaron Fox in terms of NBA All-Star voting, other than the fact that he plays in small market Sacramento, is the fact that there are so many talented guards in the Western Conference. It's a difficult road for him to be in. But in terms of talent, in terms of numbers, in terms of success, maybe not totally in the win column, but personal individual success, De'Aaron Fox deserves to be an NBA All-Star. He does. And I think he will be one this season finally. And people really started to take notice of De'Aaron Fox with some of the big numbers that he put in. He got 2 different Western Conference Player of the Week awards, and those coincidentally, or not so coincidentally, happened during the winning streaks for the Sacramento Kings last season, right? When De'Aaron Fox was playing his best, the Kings were winning. No surprise there. But looking at this tier list that The Athletic put out, I didn't expect him to be on tier 1. I didn't expect him to be on tier 2. I don't have tier 1 in front of me, but I do have tier 2 in front of me. And these are like top ranked players 8 through 19. I did not expect Fox to be on this list yet, maybe eventually, but give you an idea of some of the tier 2 players, right? Anthony Davis, Joel Embiid, Luka Doncic, Damian Lillard, Jimmy Butler, Paul George, Bam Adebayo, which may be a little bit of a stretch, Rudy Gobert, Chris Paul, Jason Tatum, Kyrie Irving, Chris Middleton. Like, these are really, really, really talented NBA players. I believe, like I said, De'Aaron Fox can get to their level, but I understand him not being there yet. So I have no problem with him not being on tier 2. I expected him to be on tier 3. I'm not going to lie to you. I expected him to be on tier 3 out of 5. And here are some of the players on tier 3 that De'Aaron Fox is not a part of their company. Some make sense. Others I really question. Here's some of the ones that make sense. Devin Booker. After the season that he's had, Devin Booker makes sense. Bradley Beal, Donovan Mitchell, Karl Anthony Towns, it's a bit of a stretch. Jaylen Brown, Pascal Siakam, Russell Westbrook, Zach LaVine, like proven all-stars, some of them winners, some of them former champions. I guess I get him not being in their tier. But then there are other players in this tier that I don't understand how they're ahead of De'Aaron Fox. Guys like Drew Holiday. And no disrespect to Drew, he's very important. And yes, of course, he was an NBA champion. So maybe that boosts him up on this list. But I think De'Aaron Fox is an all-around better player than Drew Holiday. Wouldn't you agree? Ja Morant. Now, this one is a hot button issue. How many debates have we had and heard over the last couple of seasons about De'Aaron Fox versus Ja Morant? And look, we saw how much Ja Morant shined in the playoffs and in the play-in tournament this season. Like, he got his opportunity for the Memphis Grizzlies on that big stage, and he made the absolute most of it. But every single time De'Aaron Fox and Ja Morant play each other, Fox absolutely cooks Morant. It's not close. It's not close. But Morant gets that nod because he was a star on a team that made the play-in. So I guess I can hear that argument. But again, player for player, I feel that De'Aaron Fox is better. And that doesn't feel like bias. That really doesn't feel like bias. Jamal Murray had a phenomenal bubble, but was out all last season with injury. When he did come back, didn't really look the same. Didn't look good. De'Aaron Fox, I think, is better than Jamal Murray right now. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. I love SGA. I love him as a player. He plays for the Oklahoma City Thunder, who were absolute trash. Absolute trash. Not that it was SGA's fault. That roster is built to be trash. But De'Aaron Fox has done more than SGA in his career so far. So those are some of the names. I mean, Zion is on this list. Zion's there for hype alone. Although, okay, I guess I'll listen to a conversation of people saying Zion is better than De'Aaron Fox. I don't necessarily, it bothers my stomach, but I'll listen to it. Mike Conley's on this list as well. I think De'Aaron Fox is an overall better basketball player than Mike Conley, but Conley's a veteran. He finally was an all-star. He was on a damn good team with the Utah Jazz. He's super consistent. So, okay, I'll give him that. What I won't give is some of these players on tier 4 with De'Aaron Fox. Like, for example, Gordon Hayward. Maybe 3 years ago. But now, Joe Harris. Joe Ingles. Let's see. Who else we got? LaMelo Ball. To some extent, I understand LaMelo Ball had a phenomenal Rookie of the Year season. There's a lot of hype surrounding LaMelo Ball, but De'Aaron Fox is way better than LaMelo Ball is right now, and it's not close. Malcolm Brogdon, also a good player. De'Aaron Fox is way better than him. Seth Curry. I love Seth Curry. Loved him in Sacramento. It's a shame it didn't work out here because he's great. De'Aaron Fox is miles ahead of Seth Curry. Robert Covington's another one. Aaron Gordon, he's great at dunking and nothing else. Al Horford, old man Horford. What the hell has he done? Like, they're both Bogdanoviches. I love Bogey. De'Aaron Fox is way better of a player than Bogdanovich is. They can't possibly be on the same tier. They cannot, especially when you take context into effect here. Think about it. Lots of these players that I just listed, they have specific roles on their team. Almost all of them are role players. De'Aaron Fox is the whole damn Sacramento Kings team. He's the star. He's the scorer. He's the defender, although, of course, that could be more consistent. He's the playmaker. De'Aaron Fox has to do it all in Sacramento, and last season when the Kings were winning, he did do it all. Now, I get how important making the postseason is. He hasn't done that yet in his career. That's the biggest thing holding him back, but I promise you, you give De'Aaron Fox the opportunities that John Morant got in the play-in tournament last season, you give De'Aaron Fox a 7-game series and tell me everybody in the NBA wouldn't be talking about the man. On the biggest stage he's played in, the NCAA tournament, everybody talked about De'Aaron Fox. How many times have we talked about UCLA versus Kentucky and what De'Aaron Fox did to Lonzo Ball? Fox is going, when he gets that opportunity, and I hope to God it's with the Kings this year. When he gets that opportunity, there's no doubt in my mind that he is absolutely going to shine. He's going to shine. So to put him on tier 4 with all of those players that I just listed, there are some other players on tier 4, by the way, that I don't think belong there either. Like, as in are better than tier 4. But of all those names that I listed that the Athletic thinks are on the same tier as De'Aaron Fox, that's disrespectful, man. It's just disrespectful. And it goes to show that people aren't really, or whoever wrote this article, and no disrespect to Seth Partnow, I believe he's based out of Milwaukee, if I'm not mistaken. He doesn't watch De'Aaron Fox play. Not enough people watch De'Aaron Fox play. That's going to change. That needs to change. And that is the one area that Sacramento is truly holding him back. Because when Fox gets the opportunity on that big stage, he's going to blow everybody away. Western Conference Player of the Week awards are just scratching the surface of what he is going to do. Fox is so damn good, and putting him on that tier with those other players is just straight up disrespectful. Today's episode of the Locked On Kings podcast is brought to you by Sweat Block. This product, this antiperspirant wipe, is incredible. I used to not be a very big sweater. I'm sweating a lot this summer, I tell you that much. But that was before I started using Sweat Block. I'm a golf guy. I love golfing. I love going to the driving range during lunch breaks at work. And about a week and a half ago, before I started trying Sweat Block and started using Sweat Block, I went on a muggy, hot, humid day. And within 15 minutes of hitting golf balls, I was absolutely soaked. I was dripping. I'm now using Sweat Block. I went to the driving range today, exact same conditions. In fact, it was even hotter with no wind. And I was perfectly dry. That is the power of Sweat Block. They're doctor-created, doctor-recommended. These wipes work for up to 7 days per use. They give you a dry shirt guarantee. If Sweat Block doesn't keep you dry, you get your money back. It's been featured and tested by firefighters. So if they're not sweating while fighting fires using Sweat Block, whatever your need is, it will work for you. It's been a bestseller on Amazon for the past 10 years, has over 13,000 reviews. So don't just take my word for it. Go and read those reviews, also manufactured here in the NBA. And they're super simple to get. You can get them, like I said, on Amazon. You can go to your local CVS pharmacy, find them there, super easy. Or if you go on sweatblock.com and order today and use promo code LOCKEDON, you'll get 20% off your box. You will not be disappointed by the results. Give them a try at the very least. Big thank you to Sweat Block for sponsoring the Locked On Kings podcast. Today's Locked On Kings podcast is also brought to you by BetOnline.ag, the official sports gambling partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. If you're making money off of these NBA Summer League games, first off, you might be a bit of a degenerate, but I guess you're a winner. And maybe you can teach me how to do that because I would have terrible luck betting on summer league games. But whether you're betting on NBA basketball, betting on MLB baseball, UFC action, golf, maybe you bet on the Olympics, maybe you're looking forward to football season, betting on even NFL preseason games, whatever it is, prop bets, side bets, everything in between, you can find it all on BetOnline. You'll find the best odds, the best games, the best lines there for you. And when you sign up for the first time, use promo code LOCKEDON. You'll get a 50% welcome bonus. It's free money for you to gamble with on BetOnline. And make sure you're taking advantage of our Locked On Bets show here on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's a free resource. They give you advice. They help you make money on BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts. Our mock draft trade might be dead. The Buddy Hield for Eric Bledsoe swap in picks 9 and 10, that didn't come to fruition. But there have been rumors and conversations between the Sacramento Kings and New Orleans Pelicans still involving Buddy Hield and a sign and trade for Josh Hart. Joining me here on the Locked On Kings podcast, once again, it's Jake Madison from the Locked On Pelicans podcast. Jake, it's a bummer that our trade didn't go through. It seems like the Pelicans have been still plenty active. They did find a trade partner to take both Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe off your hands, but still Buddy Hield is out there potentially for the Pelicans to end up with.
Yeah, look, they want to add some more shooting, though. They added Devontae Graham, which certainly helps that. You lose Lonzo Ball, who, depending on what you think about him, was at least a shooter. So they want to put more of that around Zion and Brandon Ingram. And when you look at kind of the young roster and the guards they have here, there's no real need for a guy like Josh Hart actually right now. And you probably don't want him getting minutes over some of these other guys. So a sign and trade where they ship him out and get someone that kind of fits what they're doing a little bit more, makes some sense to me. And that's why it's not surprising to hear that these two teams have talked.
I'm not going to lie to you. I've looked, at least from my perspective, at the New Orleans Pelicans offseason, and I've been not just unimpressed, I've been surprised by how overall quiet it's been. From my perspective, this Pelicans team is ready to make a move right now, is trying to compete right now with Zion, and of course, the Sacramento Kings are trying to do the same in their own right with De'Aaron Fox, but I expected more from the New Orleans Pelicans. Can you fill us in with the New Orleans perspective of what's going on? Is there disappointment? Are you happy with what the Pelicans are doing right now? Is there desperation? What's going on in New Orleans?
Yeah, look, first and foremost, they're better, I think, than they were last year. I think Valanciunas is a slight upgrade, slight, not huge upgrade over Steven Adams. Eric Bledsoe was so bad for this team last year that it's kind of addition by subtraction by getting him out of there. I thought Lonzo Ball was there's limitations to him as an NBA player and didn't quite fit what New Orleans was doing. And he's a tough player to build around. So while they lose him, it's not the end of the world. You bring in a guy like Devontae Graham, who can at least drive, who's an excellent shooter. So you get that spacing there. Trey Murphy has looked good in Summer League as a guy that can step in, shoot threes. So I think they're better, and they're banking on a lot of internal growth from a guy like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who's going to be probably a starter in the backcourt. Jackson Hayes, when maybe some of the legal and police issues that he's going through right now get worked out, and I expect them to, should be taking a step forward. He started to look good in the second half of last season. So when you look at it like that, they're better than they were last season. But are they that much better? And they were very clearly trying to prime themselves for a run at a guy like Chris Paul. They reportedly made him a 3-year, $100 million deal offer. They went after a guy like Kyle Lowry. They swung and missed on all of those. They used up some of the draft capital that they've gotten in the Drew Holiday deals and the Anthony Davis trades to offload bad contracts in Steven Adams and Eric Bledsoe that they used draft capital to acquire. So when you kind of put that all in perspective there, it's not a great offseason. Yes, they're better, but it's incrementally so. And for a team that's looking to make a bigger leap than just get into the play-in tournament, which would be an improvement over last year, that's probably not good enough. That's kind of where they stand right now. And so, yes, they're better, but it still makes it feel like this season was a disappointment.
Josh Hart is an intriguing potential player for the Sacramento Kings. A lot of what he does from that shooting guard position, especially when it comes to being a strong rebounding guard, I know is enticing to fans here in Sacramento. I know is enticing potentially even to the Kings. But the Kings are very loaded in their backcourt, so much so that they just had to move on from DeLon Wright and brought back Tristan Thompson as part of the deal. I personally feel like they could have gotten more for DeLon Wright. He was very good for the Kings in his limited time last season. But I mean, that trade is done with, trying to open up space for Davion Mitchell, who they just drafted. Of course, Buddy Hield is still here. He would allegedly be involved in this deal. You got De'Aaron Fox, you got Tyrese Halliburton. There's just a lot of guards on this team already. And this team still lacks wing depth. So it's a little confusing as to why the Kings potentially would be targeting Josh Hart. Before we dive into the complexities of what would have to happen in order for this sign and trade to go down, if you wouldn't mind giving, just based off of what you've seen out of Hart, an idea, the pros and cons of what you feel he would bring a team in the situation of the Kings.
Yeah, look, it's definitely a weird spot for the Kings to be in with kind of a glut of guards there, I think. But the good news is the past 2 years in New Orleans, he's played more on the wing than he has in the backcourt. They've used him almost exclusively as a small forward and at that 3 position, which again, there's positionless basketball and all of that. So that doesn't necessarily mean a ton, but they've definitely used him more in that area on the wing than they have in the backcourt as a 2 guard. So I think that kind of helps with some of that. And he gives you, a lot of things that you're going to love. Like, he's a guy that fans absolutely love because he's giving his all out there on the court. He grabs a lot of rebounds that he has no business getting because he just times it well and he out hustles every other player out there. He dives for loose balls. He's an above average, but not great defender, particularly on the wing. He's better against 2 guards there. So he does kind of all of that like dirty work that you want to have a guy that accomplishes all of that on the team. And then when people notice it, it's like, hell yeah, just give me a guy that like fights hard every single night, right? Like that can sometimes be a very important quality. And he has all of that. But his offensive game is kind of limited, and I think that's where you really start to see some holes in it. And that's one of the reasons why I think New Orleans isn't looking to necessarily bring him back. Last season, he shot 32.6% from 3. The year before that was 34%. Basically, after his rookie year where he shot close to 40%, he hasn't been particularly great from 3, and that's a little bit disappointing. He's under 34% for his career here in New Orleans. It was a guy that if you're going to have someone drive and kick to him, I don't know if he's going to make that shot. And it got into his head so much, particularly late in this past season. He was passing up open 3-point looks because he was just not confident in taking, say, those corner threes. At that point, you've got to take them and you've got to start making them if you really want to earn a big contract or start to have a future in the league, despite all of those other nice things that you do. If you can't make threes and that's your primary job because he doesn't drive, he's not like an interior scorer or anything like that, it just leaves him kind of limited, and you could really see it start to get to him mentally this past year. And look, Pels need more shooters. That's why we'd be talking about a Buddy Hield for Josh Hart swap, where you're getting the shooter, and if he could hit shots, I don't think they'd be looking to trade him. So that's really the biggest limitation from him in terms of on-court stuff. Off-court also, dude's just kind of a fun player to have. He's streaming, he does podcasts, like just like a cool dude that's like a guy that relates to fans really well, and that's never a bad thing either.
So thinking of how Josh Hart would work in Sacramento, immediately I think, okay, if he were to be on this roster and replace Buddy Hield, he would compete with Terrence Davis more than likely for backup 2/backup 3 minutes. And I might even work Mo Harkless into there, although some think Mo Harkless is going to be a backup 3/4, which does make sense. But with the abundance of bigs on this roster, with Marvin Bagley still on this roster, who the hell knows what the Kings are really going to do at the 4 spot. So it makes the most sense in my mind that Josh Hart and Terrence Davis would be competing for those backup 2-3 minutes. Terrence Davis, more known for his scoring. Sounds like Josh Hart, capable of spacing the floor, but more known for his defense and his rebounding. So let me ask you how Hart fared defending standard backup NBA threes. Was that a position that he was comfortable in? Because the Kings, they have an abundance of scoring already. There's no shortage of scoring in Sacramento. If Hart is going to get the minutes in Sac over Terrence Davis, it's because defensively he can hold up that position.
Yeah, he's an above average defender. Like that, he's not a negative defender out there on the court. When he's going against wings, he struggles a little bit. He's slightly undersized at 6'5" for that position, which means the opponent's going to have an advantage against him. When you're trying to throw him on Kevin Durant, on LeBron James, those guys, he's going to get demolished. But as you mentioned, it's kind of about backup wings, right? Backup threes. And I think that's an area where he'll do fine. And I think that's kind of the ideal role for him, coming off the bench, kind of handling some of those spot minutes. Like I don't really see him as a starter in the league. And so if you're kind of filling him into that role, yeah, I think he's going to be fine. And he's going to give you enough where you can play with a little bit more flexibility. Maybe you go small, or maybe you go with pure shooting in the backcourt when he's out there because you don't need some rebounding from your guard positions, because he's capable of grabbing so many of those rebounds and kind of eating them up. So I think he does fine kind of in that kind of role. If you put him where you know what his limitations are, you put him in a position to succeed.
So I'm not going to lie to you. I'm already not very intrigued by this. I do like the idea of Josh Hart, the player. I just don't know necessarily if a Buddy Hield, Josh Hart sign and trade is the best route for the Kings to go. It seems like plan D or E, honestly, more than A, B, and C. And that's before the complications of how this would work under the salary cap. We were talking before we started recording, and you were laying out everything that has to happen because of this Devontae Graham contract that the Pelicans just signed. It makes things a lot more complex. The Kings aren't going to want to pay Hart $22 million, around the range of money that they're paying Buddy Hield. But in order for this to work for both teams, basically, the Kings would have to take back as much money as they're sending out. So it's not like they're freeing up cap space by moving on from Buddy Hield. Can you, in the best way possible, explain what has to happen for this trade to go down between these two teams?
Yeah, this one is complex, and the Kings aren't going to create any flexibility, at least for this season, or potentially longer too, right? Depending on some of the contracts that they take back in a sign and trade scenario. Since they're both kind of operating as over the cap teams, you got to bring back money equal to what you're sending out. Where it gets tricky is the situation with Josh Hart. Let's call Buddy Hield, $24 million, just kind of a nice round number here for that. If you give Josh Hart, say, a $12 million per season contract, that first year's $12 million, it seems about right, maybe a little high, but kind of about right, because it's such a big raise from what he was making before. This phrase from the CBA called base year compensation comes into play, which basically means the Pelicans' outgoing salary is half of what his contract is. So if you offer him $12 million for the Buddy Hield trade to match that $24 million, Pelicans are only getting $6 million of that from a Josh Hart contract, meaning you got to throw in a bunch of other guys. There's Tomas Satoransky that was just acquired from the Chicago Bulls in the sign and trade for Lonzo Ball. He can get added in. I think he's at like 10. So now you're at 16 of 24. So you need to add some other players into this too to kind of make that money work. Satoransky's an expiring deal. You can get it done. The other thing though is, and this is where this gets so complicated, right? Because they just completed that trade with the Chicago Bulls and it's official, they now have to wait before they can retrade Satoransky. Normally in an offseason, that is 2 months. That pushes us right up to the start of the regular season. I believe it's 19 days this year because of the shortened offseason, so you can get this done before the regular season starts. But you got to do this trade, kind of somewhat soon, right? Or at least kind of agree to it in theory, and it wouldn't go through for 2 more weeks or so. Things can change in the meantime. That's a long time to wait. Teams are starting their preparation for the offseason. You probably want Josh Hart in there as soon as possible. It's this whole big confusing thing that probably means it's not going to actually get done. But again, I see the fit for the Pelicans and why they would want to do this. I don't see it though. I'm with you from the Kings side. Then you add the complications on top of it.
Yeah, and we'll end with this. That's perfect because I agree completely, even though I do know that there are Kings fans here that are interested. And actually, like I said earlier, I don't think the Kings would turn their nose up at the idea of Josh Hart on this roster, even with their abundance of guards. He provides some things that the Kings are honestly looking for. But the complexities of this deal, plus the need for shooting, or at least the perception of the need for shooting in New Orleans, makes me think that the Kings naturally haven't. This new front office typically doesn't leak things. So I'm not going to ask you to guess where this came from, whether it came from agents or whoever. But this seems like a deal that it makes the most sense if the Pelicans were the one picking up the phone, going to Sacramento and saying, hey, we still want Buddy Hield. We want to work something out here. We know the Lakers deal fell through. We'll start with Josh Hart. Let's make this work. That's my sense on this situation. And maybe the Kings are listening and potentially discussing it, but it seems very unlikely.
Yeah, no, it probably came from that direction. This probably came from the Pelicans, maybe also trying to drum up some interest in a Josh Hart sign and trade in other areas that they could send him out. Maybe it's the Cavaliers who've been linked to him in something for like Larry Nance Jr. or what have you. And look, there's not many contracts New Orleans can send out that match Buddy Hield. So and there's got to be an incentive, right, for the Kings. Is that Josh Hart? Probably not.
Yeah. Well, Jake Madison, I appreciate the insight. I appreciate all the information that you could provide. Of course, if this trade or a similar trade does go down, we'll reconvene to talk about it. I appreciate all that you do, my man. If anybody has any questions about what's going on with the New Orleans Pelicans at any time, Locked On Pelicans is the absolute best resource out there for you. Jake, I appreciate you. We'll do it again soon.
Of course. Thanks for having me on, Matt.
All the complications from that salary cap situation in a Kings and Pelicans, Josh Hart for Buddy Hield sign and trade. It makes me hungry. And thankfully, I have a Built Bar to get me through when I just need that snack. And it's a great snack, one, because it tastes delicious. It tastes like a candy bar covered in 100% chocolate, but it's also good for me. And they come in a variety of great flavors. My favorite is mint brownie. I ordered just boxes of the mint brownie bar alone. Unfortunately, I just ran out. I just submitted a new order for my mint brownie box, and now I'm sitting here twiddling my thumbs waiting for this box to arrive. But mint brownie is not the only flavor they have, but it is the best one. They also have raspberry, double chocolate, salted caramel, strawberry, orange, just to name a few. You can get a mixed box on Built.com, so you can try all these different flavors. And then once you have your favorites like me, you can go onto Built.com and build your own custom box there. And when you order on Built.com, make sure you use promo code LOCKEDON, 15% off your order when you do that. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDON for 15% off at Built.com. And like I said, these bars are delicious and healthy. 17 to 18 grams of protein, calories ranging from 130 to 180, only 4 to 5 grams of sugar, and only 4 to 5 grams of net carbs. Remember, promo code Locked On for 15% off at Built.com. Huge thank you to Jake Madison for joining me here on the Locked On Kings podcast today. I don't think this trade is happening. I really don't think so. I think this is wishful thinking from the New Orleans Pelicans, who want to add Buddy Hield to their roster. If Josh Hart is the best thing coming back to Sacramento, plus they're not opening up any immediate salary cap space, there has to be some kind of draft compensation or something in addition to that for this deal to be worthwhile for Sacramento. I truly don't think it's happening. Sorry, NBA or Sacramento Kings fans who wanted Josh Hart here. Maybe there's another way, but I just don't think this is it. But how do you feel about it? Let me know at Matt George Radio on Twitter. Email me, mattgeorgesports@gmail.com, or leave in the comment section down below if you're watching on YouTube. Also, let me know your thoughts on this tier list and putting De'Aaron Fox on tier 4 and having no other Kings on that tier list. Are you as, I guess, insulted for De'Aaron Fox as I am? Let me know. And like I teased earlier, I do have some life news. I am leaving Sports 1140 KHDK in Bonneville, Sacramento. Today is my actually last day at the radio station. I started there 7 years ago. I started as an intern, believe it or not, and worked my way all the way up to a full-time position that's turned into a career. A wonderful 7 years there. Met a lot of great people. Helped form me into the man and the professional that I am today. But I am moving on. I have accepted a job at ABC 10 Television here in Sacramento, also owned by Tegna, who owns and operates the Locked On Podcast Network. So I'm very excited about that. We'll be working closely with Sean Cunningham from ABC 10 that you've heard and seen a lot here on the Locked On Kings podcast. So I'm very excited about that. So my credentials are changing a little bit. I'm going from radio to television, but like I said, don't you worry. It's not going to affect anything, or as far as I've been told, it's not going to affect anything with Locked On Kings. So the podcast will continue, and I'm continuing to pour myself into this podcast. I love this podcast. The numbers have been excellent. It is truly my passion project, my baby that I have built up with you over the last few years. So many of you are just starting to tune in now. I've gotten so many great messages of people now just starting to watch on YouTube, discovering it for the first time, or maybe paying attention if you're a fan of Davion Mitchell. Whoever you are, listening or watching the Locked On Kings podcast means the world to me. And I've put so much effort into this podcast. I'm so proud of where it's gone, excited to see where it's going to continue to grow. And I'm excited to have that go alongside my growth in television at ABC 10. So thank you to everybody. Just truly thank you for investing in me, for believing in me. Stuff like this is not possible without that. I truly do not take it for granted. And I look forward to continuing Locked On Kings and continuing Sacramento media coverage and taking it to even greater heights. If you could leave a review for this Locked On Kings podcast, that would be fantastic. Best place to do that is on Apple Podcasts or iTunes. Hit 5 stars, leave a little blurb about what you like about the podcast. That's a great place for constructive criticism as well. You can put there what you would like to hear on the podcast, especially during these dog days of the off season this month, in between summer league ending and the start of training camp that's coming here pretty soon. And if you want to write something that encourages Sacramento Kings fans, just NBA fans in general, to listen to the podcast, that would help us out a ton too. Thanks again for all your support. Thanks for another great week here on Locked On Kings. Looking forward to more great content next week. I hope you have a great weekend. Until next time, my name is Matt George. You have been listening to Locked On Kings, part of the Locked On Podcast Network.